Hello and welcome to another episode of the MiamiHal Real Estate Show. I'm here with Hav. Oh, wait a minute. You're not Hav. You're much better looking than Hav.
Oh, thanks, Hal.
But you do work with Hav Gonzalez.
Yes, I am on the Gotta Have Miami team, Remax team.
The Gotta Have Miami.
Gotta Have Miami, yes.
That's perfect. Yeah. So this is Ashley. Her last name
Famey,
is Famey,
yes.
or Fami, as you can say either, right?
Either way, I'll
Very
respond to both.
And we're going to have a lively discussion about the real estate market. And unlike Hav, who's been in the business forever,
Right.
you haven't.
I have not.
We're going to get a fresh perspective. And I think there's a lot of good questions and things we can explore with your fresh eyes.
All right.
Good.
Shoot, what's your question?
Well, first of all, I do want to remind our audience with questions. There's a social media box right in front of you. If you're watching live, type in a question and our producer will put that up on screen and we'll be happy to answer any questions about real estate. But we will dive right into this.
All right.
I'm going to ask you a question that I often ask, Hav. What did you learn in real estate this week?
This week, it's kind of just a relearning that you're not closed until you're closed.
Okay.
My main complaint is condos, condo management. As I say, I'm praying to the condo gods this week. We're at their mercy. Specifically, we're waiting on some questions to be answered on a condo questionnaire for financing. And we all thought that these questions were answered until yesterday, and our closing is tomorrow, which has, of course, been extended. And the questions are a little bit more complicated to answer, contrary to what we thought.
Got it. I forgot. What we really should do is give our audience a little background.
Sure.
So both Hav and I have been with Remax for years, and we've both been in the real estate business for years.
Yeah.
You are now with Remax Advanced Realty.
I am.
But how long have you been in the business?
I am less than 1 year in the real estate business. I got my license in May. So less than 1 year, really.
Okay.
I was a registered nurse prior to this career shift, and I just was kind of ready for a change. And I knew I wanted to do sales, and I thought to myself, what can I sell?
And real estate was the answer.
Real estate was the answer for a few reasons. Okay. I had the offer from Hav for sort of a mentorship relationship to, get started on my journey. So that made it much easier to make the decision, to have a mentor that was willing to take on me as a project.
So only approximately a year in the business, which is an advantage and a disadvantage. I'm going to tell you why it's a disadvantage.
Tell me.
Okay. And you're going to tell me all the good reasons why it's an advantage. It's a disadvantage simply because you don't have perspective.
Right.
And so if you're in the business less than a year, you have seen an incredible seller's market, but you have not seen a balanced market and you haven't seen a buyer's market yet.
Right.
And I know this is obviously going to be just your interpretation of prior events. What do you think a buyer's market looks like?
Oh man, you're going to have a lot more compliant sellers. It's normal. Like you say, I don't have perspective. I see sellers kind of just like running the show in the sense of one's closing date. They want post occupancies, just kind of taking advantage of, not advantage, that's the wrong word, but they know that they have all the power. Hav likes to tell me that sellers always have all the power, which is kind of true, but in this market, it's really true.
But post occupancy, I think, is incredibly interesting right now.
Yeah.
I had something happen. I had a listing that's actually going to close in the next day or two. And that listing went on market in February, but the seller said, listen, I want to get under contract, but I can't move out of my house until June 14th because that's when the kids get out of school.
Right.
And so even going in, and all the marketing said that. And so we still had a ton of people that wanted to buy and were willing to work with that. But what they got for post occupancy as an agreement, I could never imagine. Here's what they got. Okay. So some people came to us and said, oh, we'll just close June 14th. We have no problem with a long close. And that was a reasonable solution.
Yeah.
Other people came and said, listen, we can close a little bit early or a lot early, but we're going to rent back.
Right.
At a reasonable rate, but at a rate.
Right.
And the offer,
The
that
winning
actually,
offer.
the offer that became the contract was like mind blowing. Here's what they said: we're going to close in April. That's May and then June. So half of April into May, half of May into June. 2 months of time.
Rent free.
Stay there free.
Yeah.
Now, even that sounds somewhat interesting until you understand what that new buyer, that new owner is going to be doing in the next year or two. They're paying the real estate taxes, right? And they're paying the insurance. And still they've got somebody that doesn't belong in there anymore for 2 months. So there's liability things too.
Yeah.
So they're actually paying to keep the people there for 2 months.
Yeah.
No money's changing hands at all. So you talk about post occupancy and that the seller is in control. That is absolutely true.
It's true.
So
it's very true.
You also mentioned at the beginning of the show that you had some issues with a condo board, and that's what you learned. Any more detail you want to share with the audience? Because all these little stories, anything that two agents sit down and complain about, like Hav and I often do, is such a lesson for people that are out there in the audience.
Yeah.
And so tell us what you really learned and who you think is at fault and who you think should maybe change their ways a little bit.
This particular situation is kind of interesting. I've made some assumptions about it, which you shouldn't assume, but I don't have all of the facts, and I probably won't. So the condo questionnaire that was requested by the bank was completed and sent back to the bank. It wasn't just, I guess, a few days before closing, however their procedures are over there at the bank, that they realized there were 2 unanswered questions. So following up with the condo, the property manager who completed the questionnaire has quit.
Okay, so let's pause because there's a couple things that I want to make sure aren't information gaps to our audience members.
Sure.
When a person wants to purchase in a condo, they're not just purchasing from the seller, they're also having to purchase and get approved by the condominium.
Right.
And then, of course, when there's a lender involved, in this case, you mentioned a bank, so there's a lender.
Yes.
The lender also doesn't just qualify the overall mortgage by looking at the purchase price and saying this house is able to be purchased and it's a reasonable price.
Right.
But they also have to make sure there's insurance on the property. And then they have to look at the condominium as a community.
Right.
And make sure these questions get answered. So what's typically on a condo questionnaire? Because that's what you're really alluding to. And what was missing off this particular?
What was missing was the number of units owner occupied or investor owned. And there was another question regarding like the condition of some part of the condo. I can't remember the exact part.
Here's a pop quiz. Why would a lender care who is owner occupied and who is not owner occupied in a condominium complex?
Because you have investors that, if there's more investors than owners in a particular condo building, I guess it's easier to collapse, or it's different. Yeah. I don't know all the details, but it's different having a condo full of owner occupied units versus investor units.
Yeah. In general, that's correct. The idea is that the lender wants to make sure that, not only is the unit at that condominium worth the price that's being paid, but they also want to make sure that the condominium association is stable.
Right.
And so if there's owners in there, it's far easier to call that a stable environment.
Yeah.
Where investors can come and go
quickly
and really don't have any personal stake in it.
Correct.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and that's understandable.
This wasn't answered, and that's an important question for the lender. So that's why you're delayed. At least that's one of the 2 reasons you're delayed.
Yeah,
and then the association president disappears, or the management person disappears.
The management person, I don't know, quits, resigns, whatever you want to call it. So there's somebody else, who's stepping in, and they can't give us a timeline on when these questions will be answered.
So the seller in this case, to get the condo questionnaire answered, has obviously gone to the association and said, listen, I got to close. Answer this stuff.
I'm hoping that's what's going on. I'm representing the buyer in this transaction. I have confidence that the listing agent is guiding her sellers to step in, but hopes and dreams, just fingers crossed.
All right, we're gonna kind of pivot a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned that there's another agent involved, and
Yeah.
typically that's the case in a transaction. Two agents, one representing buyer, one representing the seller.
Right.
And so, over the last year, since you've become an agent, classify the quality of people that are agents in this business.
A range. There's such a
Okay.
range. There's such a range. There's people that you're like, wow, this is such a pleasant person to work with.
Yeah.
This transaction went great. Like, I have no complaints. And then you have some agents from the first moment you interact with them, you're like, oh my gosh, I hope they don't want to buy this house, And then, of course, I mean, I speak for myself. I'll work with whomever, if that's a house that my buyers want, I'll work it out. I can communicate. But there's some people that they just don't answer the phone, don't answer text messages. They don't, when you do get them on the phone, they can't answer a question. It's frustrating.
So I want you to ask the question, what did I learn
Oh.
in real estate?
What
this
did you
week?
learn in real estate this week?
Because it's going to be a continuation kind of your theme. There's a wide variety of people in the industry that you have to interact with in order to get to a closing table.
Mm-hmm.
And here, I'm not going to complain about agents. I'm going to talk to you about attorneys that get involved in real estate transactions, because typically at higher price points, or when there's an estate involved or probate, then attorneys tend to be involved in the transaction.
Right.
And there's a couple of sayings that real estate agents have, and I'm sure there's corollaries to that with the attorneys. But the statements that real estate agents can typically say about attorneys is they will find some reason to show the value to their client as to why they're involved in that transaction, because they're charging big bucks.
Right.
So when an attorney states something that is factually inaccurate about how a contract is written, the agents who are seasoned, like I am and like Hav is and a bunch of others, they're like, this is incredibly wrong.
Yeah.
However, you cannot typically go to an attorney who has the ego that they have. Hey, I'm an attorney and you're just nothing more than a real estate agent, and easily tell them, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, you read that wrong.
Right.
And the other part is an attorney is an attorney is an attorney. But we know as agents that what you really want as part of a transaction in real estate is a real estate attorney.
Yeah.
Because yes, attorneys are very good at reading contracts, but there are nuances to each. And if they're typically reading a contract that's not a real estate contract, they can get themselves and their clients in trouble when they read a real estate contract incorrectly. I can't tell. This week, you asked me, I wrote up an offer. I was working with a buyer. I wrote up an offer. I made the offer as fair as I could between buyer and seller on all the other terms. The real term that we had to deal with was the price.
Okay.
And I turned it in to, this was a direct seller, so there was no other agent involved. And of course, they said, oh, I have an attorney. That attorney happened to not be a real estate attorney.
Oh.
So it took about 24 to 36 hours later than it should have. And we got back a very reasonable attorney. Don't get me wrong. The attorney was very nice and cordial to me, but turned it back and had crossed out some of the terms that made it very even, and actually gave it back to me where the terms were better for my buyer. And what am I supposed to do there? This is really odd, right? So what I'm really alluding to, and I think you are as well, and our audience members should really kind of get this. When you're dealing with real estate, you really have to make sure that you are understanding of the contract and the terms and get the right people around you. It's the quality of the people. So there is a question here, and Ashley, I'm going to have you read it because I'm having a little glare. I can't quite read that. Can you?
Do you drive together with potential clients or in separate cars?
Oh, okay.
That's a good question.
why don't you start and I'll provide an answer as well.
I currently meet them there in my own car.
Okay.
That is my current method.
Is there a reason for that?
Insurance.
Okay, good. All right. I would echo that. There is an insurance issue if you're taking other people in your vehicle, much like Uber and Lyft drivers, right? They have to have insurance for the people they take around if it's part of their business. The other part I feel is just, I think people feel more comfortable meeting me at locations rather than going with me.
Agreed.
It gives them time to think. They might be doing some other things. And I often am not coming where I've got 25 minutes to go meet them somewhere and then drive to where we're going and then
drive
drop
them
them back
back.
off. And
Right.
so in this type of environment, our new world, right? We're always busy with something. Yes, I can commit to being somewhere at 3 o'clock and making it there, but I cannot commit that I have that half an hour or 25 minutes before
And
that
after.
to kind of, yeah. So yes, it's much more efficient, and the insurance is also a very good point.
But I agree with you. I think most clients feel more comfortable in their own cars.
Yeah.
And then if it's like a couple that's looking at houses, then they could discuss, in between showings, if you're having a few showings, they can have their own side conversations that I'm not listening to, to have privacy to discuss their decisions. And I think it's a good way. I mean, I've never had somebody request like, hey, could you pick me up? I haven't had that request yet. So that's where I'm at on the picking up clients.
George, you always have great questions. I think there might have been another one out there, and if there is, we'll get right back to that. So you've been in the business a year, and this market is all about sellers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Sellers can almost command any price they want.
Right.
And I am finding it very hard to work in this environment for one specific reason. Anybody that's looking to hire us to sell their homes is relying on our deep knowledge of how to price the home.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, and I'm sure you get this, and the audience members, please understand this. An agent is not going to get you a certain amount of money in the market. An agent's job is to understand what the market value is, not to overpromise and say, well, if you hire me, I'm going to be able to get you X amount more. But our job is to understand the market and what an appraiser ultimately is going to appraise the home for.
Yes.
So that we don't start off trying to sell a $600,000 house at $750,000 list price, because all we're doing is spending a lot of time that's going to be wasted, and we're going to disappoint both the seller and whoever the buyer is, right?
And I think it's just customizing to your client. Now, maybe you have a seller that can sit around and isn't in a rush, and they do want that 750, even though the house is only going to appraise for 600. And you can be upfront and transparent with potential buyers, so you're not wasting your time or anybody else's time showing a house that's not going to appraise. I think it's all about communication, honesty, and transparency. I'm not going to tell somebody you want to list your house for 100,000, 200,000 above what we feel would appraise. You're probably going to sit on it, even though it's a hot market, for a while, if it sells at all at that price. So
you're being very nice about it. It's really important to sit down with your potential new client that's going to sell their home and you're going to get a listing from.
Right.
And to be honest, and firm, but not nasty to them.
Right.
So we'll take that example. If I did my research, walked into a house, confirmed that the house was in the shape that I expected it to be in, and it's a $600,000 home, even in this heightened market, and they said, well, I want to list at 750. My next response, yours might be different, is, I'm sorry that we don't see this eye to eye. I think you need to find another agent. I would be willing to walk away from that because it's a $150,000 gap.
Right.
Now, I said I was a little frustrated because I'm really good at understanding and evaluating homes to get within 3% of what an appraiser is going to get to. And my history has shown that. But it's not working now.
No,
because the market is crazy.
The market's crazy. Like you said, I don't have perspective. So maybe like your perspective from your previous years where it was a buyer's market or a balanced market kind of holds you.
That's an advantage to you because
I only know a hot market. So if I was presented with that situation, I would list at 750 without a question,
Right.
but with that clear expectation of this isn't going to fly off the market.
Okay.
You might not get the 750. You know, I would confidently say you'll get over 600, but you might not get the 750 that you're looking for.
And I'm first of all, I think that's the right attitude for you to have. And I hope you don't waste time, but I think on that 600, 750 example, you
Right.
probably would be.
Right.
But in smaller dollar figures where you're listing $50,000 above what it should be selling for, I'm surprised more and more often this market just won't give up. And there are buyers that have gotten so desperate and maybe a little crazy that they're spending that money. And because there's enough of those crazies out there, the appraisers are sometimes meeting the price.
Yeah.
And that scares me a little bit too. Because what
Don't
does
be
that
scared.
mean?
Don't be scared, Hal.
But what does that mean for the market? That means that at some point there's going to be a correction, just like the stock market.
Right.
Things get overheated. Guess what? There's a correction. Things get oversold in the stock market. There's a correction in the reverse direction, which we call rally, right? So it's going to happen in real estate. The question right now is when. And I've been predicting, and I won't even get into that, but do you have any predictions as to when this market might change? I'm not saying go down, but change.
I don't have a prediction. I don't think I'm informed and experienced enough to have like that prediction outlook. I just don't foresee it going down. Stabilizing. I feel like it might be stabilizing now from when I started last summer. Last summer, I feel was absolutely insane.
Okay.
Just rentals now the rentals just with pricing and the shortage, that's crazy. But buyers last summer, I had these poor buyers, like 8 offers. They were like, we need a break. They took a 3-month break, and then we did get a contract at the end of the year. But they had to take a break. It was exhausting. Yeah. So I don't have a prediction as to when. I don't think there's a downward trend. I think we're still on the up, just not as steep, you know?
You're seeing things primarily working with buyers or renters.
Yes.
And I'm seeing predominantly, not all, with listings, meaning I'm helping people sell their homes or as landlords to rent out. We're on relatively opposite ends of the spectrum right now.
Yeah.
One of the things that I saw this past week, actually, which I was amazed at, is that I had an open house, not for a sale, but for a rental.
Right.
And it created exactly the right opportunity that I wanted. And one of the offers came with something that I had never seen for a rental.
Let's hear it.
So I knew that the property was going to rent for more than the list price.
Of course.
And the idea was put a list price on the rental so that I would have a good number of people come out for the open house. And that's what happened. But when you get anybody out and there's a small crowd with other people trying to do the same thing,
creates more of a demand.
It creates the demand.
Yeah.
So I ended up with an offer that was already above list price, and it said we are going to go up in $50 increments as an escalation clause. We will beat any other offer out there by $50, and here's our ceiling. And that ceiling was quite high. I said, this is brilliant. Of the agent.
It is brilliant of the agent.
But again, all that's doing is putting more fuel on the fire to this craziness that's in our market.
The rental market is crazy. I've had a few renters, especially from outside of Miami and Florida, that are relocating here, and they're thinking about renting because, of course, you're moving to a new city. Rentals,
try it out first.
Rentals seems like the logical option. And I'm kind of persuading them otherwise. If you have the timeline and the financing to buy something, buy it.
Yeah. Because
you're only going to gain equity. And if you hate Miami in a year, sell it, rent it, do something with it. You have way more options to buy, especially in the condo market, than to rent.
There's so many dials to this market. So you can have somebody that's the stodgy old guy who says things are overpriced right now, so you should wait. And there's an argument for that, right? If you wait to buy, the market's going to turn at some point, and maybe your dollar's going to go further. But the other dial, which is counterintuitive to that, is saying, hey, the mortgage rates are going up.
Yeah.
So if you're financing, which most people are,
Right.
overall, yeah, you might be paying $50,000 more than this house is going to be worth soon, but over the course of an entire mortgage payment,
you're going to get it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to you saying like crazy buyers. I'm going to relate it to my nursing career. You know, I thought the reason I stepped away from nursing is I was in nursing for a long time. And believe it or not, I got to the point where I felt like I was not impactful to the patients. Maybe just because life took over, kids, you know, my life took over. So
Yeah.
that's why I stepped away from nursing, because I felt like I wasn't impactful as a nurse. I feel very impactful as a real estate agent because people need somewhere to live.
Yes.
The
It's a big
demand
deal.
is real. It's
Yeah.
not an inflation bubble in the real estate market. The demand's real. There's real desperate buyers out there, you know, and they're going to be homeless not because they don't have money. So that's why they're going to pay 50,000 over, you know, what they appraises for, or, you know, all the crazy situations, because they're desperate. So when I get a contract for a buyer and I know that they're going to have a home and they're not going to be homeless, even though it's not their dream home, I feel like I'm making an impact on their life, a positive impact.
You are.
Yeah.
Again, you're going to make a positive impact on my life right now because I have glare on the screen and there's another question. So can you read that, please?
Do you feel that the current people looking at homes, the question disappeared. Okay.
Over here on the big screen.
Oh, there you go. Do you feel that the current people looking at homes are concerned about the mortgage rates rising? It's an interesting question. I mean, they definitely are concerned. They know that every week that goes by that they're not under contract, their interest rates potentially going up. So I think they are concerned. But I think in the scope of interest rates, 4.9% isn't absolutely horrible. It could be worse, and
it could be a lot worse.
And it could be heading that way. So I think they're definitely worried. Every week that goes by and you're not under contract, you're like, another eighth of a point.
and listen, every eighth is, you know, impactful.
Yeah.
But if you look at the bigger picture, your rent rates are going up incredibly fast.
Mhm.
And every dollar you put into a rent is lost dollars. Yes, 4.9% is not as good a number as 3.5%.
Right.
But that's what it is today.
Correct.
And it's going to be higher later.
Yep.
So yes, people are concerned, I believe, about the mortgage rate numbers. And eventually it's going to have a calming and a cooling effect on pricing and activity because people will be priced out. Right now, somebody might be able to spend $2,500 a month on their monthly mortgage bill. But what happens when that same house 2 weeks from now is going to cost them $2,700 a month for the next 30 years?
Right.
Hard numbers to look at, but it's better than 6%, 7%.
Absolutely.
We were there not too long ago.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it'll get back there. And it's a wave that's always happened, and it'll happen again. So buy now, plan to refinance when rates drop again.
Yeah.
You know.
So these are all the dials we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the other dial, which is really the base of all dials, which is supply and demand.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of supply. We've got a ton of demand. What's going to happen to prices? If you look at it just like that, prices are going to keep going up.
Right.
But I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. There's a lot of other sub dials that are happening, right? So as of January, anybody that was on forbearance, there's no more forbearance.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the lenders who fronted money out because there was nothing in their escrow accounts, they are now the homeowner is now having to pay back
that money.
The lender for last year's taxes,
right,
and last year's insurance. And so now somebody who thought they had a $2,500 a month mortgage bill for 30 years, well, last year and the year before and the year before it was $2,500. Now it's $3,100 or whatever the number is.
Yep.
And they go, well, I can't pay that. So even though they're not upside down on the house, they're upside down on their monthly payment, and they're going to be forced to sell at some point. So I think the inventory numbers start to change not too far in the future.
I think that's an accurate outlook. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else that you can kind of tell our audience about what it's like to be in this crazy market, only having that perspective? What's another positive thing that you can probably have as an advantage over me as a seasoned crotchety old agent.
I guess it's just lifestyle as a real estate agent. I'm nothing luxurious, but I love to be out and about and on the street and in the sun and doing stuff. Um, I have clients, oh, thank you so much for coming to meet me. And it's like, to me, it's like, oh my God, it's a pleasure that I get to drive over here and meet you. So I just love what I do. I love to help people find houses. I feel like I'm impacting their lives positively, and it's really been fun so far.
Good. All right. How much more time do we have? Because that clock disappeared on us. We're perfect timing.
Oh, good.
It was a pleasure to have you here, enjoying the conversation here with Ashley. And I hope you learned something too. Every week we have a great guest right here in that seat. And we hope you join us next week. Thursdays at 2:00 is the time. We try to be there at 2. Today was a little late. Apologize for that. Until next week, have a great week in real estate.